Recording. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us. Just wanted to start by setting a bit of a scene around your experiences with racism in the area, because for most of us, it feels like it's quite an historic thing. And so I guess just getting a sense of, how you've experienced racism in the Wimmera would be a really good starting point for us.
Cool. It's funny you say that. A lot of people think it's historic, particularly when the George Floyd stuff happened. That Australian news reporter said, "Oh, we don't have that sort of stuff here in Australia," which shows the lack of, I suppose, education around what is happening with Aboriginal people across the country. So, with me, my first experience with racism unfortunately happened in Horsham when we moved here in the early 90s. I'm not going to name which school because it's not about which school it is. It's about what happened to me and my first experience. And I didn't know what it meant to be called a coon at the time. And so Mum had to explain it to us, and me and my younger brother, because we had no idea. Never happened to us at the I was actually born in Sale, and we went to a school there for the first 2 years or 3 years, and I'd never had any experience of racism there at all. So, unfortunately, Horsham has been a big part of my life, and that's where majority of the racism has happened. So once we ended up moving from Horsham to Dimmy over to Adelaide to a town called Mannum, and then back to Horsham in '95. And when we moved back in '95, we used to hang out a lot with their cousins, and we used to get harassed quite a lot by the police back then. I was 13 when we moved back here, and one of my first experiences with the police was being lined up at the back of the Small Engines building, which is now the Harley Davidson store up near the Wimmera Bridge. And they patted us down, emptied our pockets. What are you doing on this side of town? Because you're on the wrong side of town, pretty much. And I didn't understand what he meant when he said, "What are you doing on this side of town?" Until I asked my cousin later, and he said, "Oh, they all think we live in the Bronx, so that's where we should be," sort of thing. Which I thought was stupid. Anyway, and then we just randomly, would get, whenever they'd see us, they'd pull us over and again pat us down, empty pockets. Where are you going? I think it's called Bradbury Lane where Gypsy Willow is. They used to take us down there one at a time, and I actually never went down there, but my younger brother did, and they said, they'd make you drop your pants and stuff like that, which is, when you're kids, it's pretty confronting. There was another time when there was 5 of us, because we, as Aboriginal boys, we all hung out together. We're cousins, so that's what we did. We're at the velodrome, got blamed for breaking some chairs, and then we were forced to sit in the police station on the floor back to back in a circle until we confessed what we didn't do. So we were in there for, I think it was nearly 7 hours all up, until I said to my younger brother, "Let's just say we did it, just so we can get out of here." And Mum and Dad weren't too happy when they found out what they did, because, again, I was 14, the oldest was 16, my younger brother's 13, and one of the other cousins was 13, so minors, being treated like adults. And the 90s were, that time in the 90s, between 95 and 99, it was actually pretty tough. Like, I didn't like to be harassed that much by anyone, and the police were the ones that did it all the time. So I have a really innate distrust for police, even though I work with them and I do it a lot. I just don't have any trust for them at all. And then as we got older, my younger brother, he's a big dude, 6'5", worked at the pubs and stuff like that, developed a bit of a reputation because he is a bit of a hothead. And, has a problem with authority, particularly people in uniform, especially the police uniform. And he was harassed not only by random police, but individuals for quite some time. As I said to you yesterday, there was one guy that harassed him quite a bit. Used to assault him on different occasions. He actually even tried to assault me mum one day. I've got to tell you that yesterday when we were talking about it. And a couple of the guys we played footy with jumped in and we're going to have a crack at him. But and as I said yesterday, the guy in question then we found out he was having a sexual relationship with a girl 16 years old and selling them weed and stuff like that. And my brother said it in front of another cop, and then, as usual, when stuff like that said, they just get transferred away. Nothing really ever happens, and the problem's not solved. So whilst that was one problem that was solved for us, we still had other people within the police force that used to give us a lot of hassle, and particularly my younger brother. One thing I didn't tell you was that because we, a group of us cousins that all hang together, we could be quite a large group, particularly when we got to age of going out. So, there was a core group of us, which is me, my younger brother, and Robbie Fry. We, since probably about 15, 16, have all hung around together quite consistently. And the police actually labelled us a gang. And this come from a police officer at the time that told us, one that we'd actually developed over time, a relationship with. That, I'm not saying all police bad, because Trevor Alston, who worked for Gorham, was a police officer, grew up with the Aboriginal community in Dimmy back in the day, and he was a really good guy. And Peter Mellington was another bloke who ended up really, through the youth group back in the late 2000s, developed some really good relationships with him. And I think it was him that told us that that they had labelled us a gang, with my brother as the head honcho and Robert and myself as lieutenants, and then all these other guys were underlings, I suppose. Because when we went out, or whenever they seen us, you'd see the core three of us, and then most likely Brett, Chris Harrison, Sonny Seek, Rooney, Jake, Brett Goods. Sometimes when we went out, we could be like 15 deep with people, but they're all black people, and we'd get treated differently because we were such a big group of people. And I thought it was always stupid because we weren't a gang. We were kids and cousins that grew up together.
Yeah.
So, during the 2000s was rougher because police, we were all, particularly myself, Colin, and who's my younger brother, and Robbie, we're 6'2", taller, and we're big dudes. So, a lot of people, whether it was police or just people in general, always wanted to have a crack at us, especially my younger brother, who had quite a reputation. And I'm not saying that he was the best person. He got in a lot of trouble himself, because of alcohol and whatever. So he's not innocent by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing he never did is he never started any fights, but he ended a lot of fights, which caused him to have this reputation. But we were also guilty by association. So if Colin or Robert, or well, not really Robert, because he never really got in trouble, and I didn't really either, but if we were around Colin, we were just guilty by association. If we were with guys like Tony Marks, who has an even worse reputation than my brother, we were still guilty by association. It was just, I just, to this day, it still bothers me that, when I go to meetings with police and stuff like that, I always think, they're judging me because of who my brother is and what he's done and stuff like that. I was arrested once actually for sticking up for my brother, and then surrounded by 8 cops in the foyer at the police station. And I thought, holy crap, I'm about to get my ass whipped. And I'm quite mouthy, so I got out of it that way.
To believe.
And interesting enough, it was funny because they arrested me and then kicked me out of the police station. I was actually scared that they were going to say I fled or something like that. So and that's just a few of the stories, I suppose, over the journey, particularly with police. They've been probably the main ones that have treated us pretty badly. Because we are big guys that all hang around together. We didn't get. A lot of people were too afraid to say anything because we did. If there was one of us and there was generally another 5 or 6 not far away, so people were too scared to really say anything. We did get it on a footy field a lot though during junior footy, and again, it didn't happen to my nieces and nephews when my nephews particularly, when they started playing footy. There wasn't a lot of sort of racist remarks being thrown around, but at school and stuff like that is where they copped it most, particularly when you got to secondary school. They were still getting quite a lot of it. So a lot of kids wouldn't say anything on the footy field, but would say stuff to them at school. And their father's not the greatest person, so those boys also get judged because of who their father is, and which is unfortunate because they're not like him. So I feel sorry for him in that sort of sense. But there is stories of kids at Horsham College here. I remember Brian Harrison was saying during one of his classes that he mentioned that they were talking about Captain Cook discovering Australia, and Brian said, well, he didn't discover Australia because there was already black people living here. And the teacher kicked him out of class, which, sort of shows I'm not saying that teacher's still around now, but it sort of shows you the lack of respect for, Australia's true history. If we, it's like, when they say, you should get over it, you move on and stuff like that. We would never say that to Jewish people who've been through the Holocaust and stuff like that. And the stuff that's happening to us back then is still, some of that's still happening now. So for us, it's not historical. It's now. One of the other things that I don't like is, like, we don't like racism, but I don't like stereotyping either. And particularly with the males, we're all alcoholics, drug addicts, perpetrators of family violence, lazy, yada yada yada. I said to you yesterday, we were talking about it, that when I got my new car last year, so I bought a brand new car, I'm actually sometimes embarrassed to own it because of the stereotyping that people put on us, that we get free cars and free money and free houses. Where this stuff comes from, I don't know, because if they were handing out free cars, free houses, and free money, I would have jumped in that line a long time ago. But I've been working since I was 15. The longest I've ever had off work is 3 months, and that was by choice. But the fact that I own a car, and it's a pretty good car. If anyone knows what a Ford Ranger Raptor is, then you sort of know that it's the top model of the Rangers. But when I get the feeling that every time I jump out of it, and people judging me like, oh yeah, he's just another one of those black guys got the free stuff, and it annoys me because I can't enjoy, like, around my own people I can, and you sort of you have a good laugh and joke about owning a new car and feeling pretty proud, but then when you go out in the wider community, it's almost like I feel like, because of all the stuff that's happened to us, that I'm being judged because of the stereotyping and stuff like that. And then the last thing I'll mention is, when the George Floyd thing happened, I seen the video, And, it took me a little bit to get to sleep that night because, the trauma that it sort of brings back from all the stuff that's happened to us over the journey. It's, I don't understand in today's society how that can still happen. I mean, we all seen what police brutality had happened back in '92 with the Rodney King stuff, and when they got a not guilty verdict in '93, LA rioted for 3 days or whatever it was, and even now they're still writing about Black Lives Matter. But I think the reason I talked about a lot of this stuff was because it did raise all that trauma that's happened to me, and I've been angry for about 4 weeks now, and even this morning, we've been talking about some of the stuff that's going on around the country with some of the other boys, and it's actually exhausting not talking about it, just being involved with it somehow at some level. And I feel for the older people who had it 3, 4, 5 times as bad as us. My mum was alive still when Aboriginal people weren't considered people, and I just feel sad that we still have to, prove our worth, I suppose. One of the things I watched last night was about, an African American soldier who wasn't, I guess, given a Medal of Honor for the stuff he did in World War One. And I'm like, it's the same thing that happened to Aboriginal people here. There's a couple of us that are, got noticed, but a lot of the Aboriginal people fought for their country and come home and still got treated not even like citizens. They went back to the grind, and my great grandfather Colin Hood from down in the southwest, he actually owned land in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then had it taken away from him, and then he ended up on a mission in Lake Tyers. It's when they talk about blackfellas getting free money, well, let's talk about the stolen wages that happened back in the early 1900s, probably in the 1800s as well, that we don't have a lot of records for. So it's brought a lot of things to a head, I think, the George Floyd stuff. But really, it's okay for people to be standing up and saying, we want change, but we want more than just people saying we need some doing, we need some actions, because police brutality and things like that stuff can't keep going on. Sorry, I've rambled on a little bit, but I think it's important for people to know that each Aboriginal person has a story, and whilst some of it may not be as bad as mine, there's heaps of people who are way worse. And then there's some that have probably had the good experience, and good luck to them. I wish that I had it, but unfortunately I didn't. And when we talk about education, like, I only completed year 8 in school, and a lot of people think I did like university and stuff like that. I actually had to learn to talk like this to do the role that I'm in, because if you hear me with all the boys and that, there's a lot of F's and C's and all this other stuff that comes out. Actually, I try really hard not to swear when I'm in meetings and stuff like that, because I just have a tendency to do it a lot. It's not because being aggressive or anything, that's just how we talk. So yeah, hopefully people can appreciate that everyone, particularly people who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, have different stories. It doesn't matter if they're black or white, but usually it's been pretty bad. The other problem, I guess, is in the systemic part, is the welfare mentality. It's hard. Like, majority of us grow up poor. Like, we were poor. Well, we weren't originally. My old man used to work, and then he broke his back on the SO oil rig down in Longford, and he became an alcoholic, and Mum left him, and then we were poor right through. Like, probably wasn't until I was in my third year of my apprenticeship that I started actually making some decent coin, because, being an apprentice, man, that's rough.
Exactly.
It's like $80 a week at the start, which is, you're not paying for anything on $80 a week.
Exactly.
Lucky I was still 16 living with mum, but yeah, I think that's enough on my experience. Otherwise, we'll be here forever.
Yeah, but it is a good point, because I think it is that notion of really huge issues. And so I guess from our perspective, trying to think about how we can make any kind of change, because it does come down to the fact that we actually need to put our money where our mouth is and actually do something. Can you explain the way that Delkaia Aboriginal Best Starts changed the way that early years services in the Wimmera have been working over the past 2.5 years using this improvement approach?
So, I guess if we go through how Delkaia works, we start with the logic model, building a logic model. When we build the logic model, we do it on the feedback from community. I guess in it there is mechanisms for feedback, but we, when we did the training in that, the Aboriginal community always consults first and then does things. Whereas it seems sometimes the department wants you to build the plan and then consult later, which to me is backwards. So we decided anyway to consult with the people that are in the early years, the families that have kids in the early years services, and then give them the options. Is it the outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have the 6 outcomes, I think it is, and then they pick which ones that they want or they see as a priority for the community. And then we take the top 2 or 3 outcomes, and then they become our short-term outcomes to help, do the work that we're doing within Best Start. From there, we then go on to the PDSAs, and then I guess when we first started, a lot of people wanted to do the big changes, and we broke them down into small steps to get to that big change. And there's been some really big positive changes for our community, particularly in the Horsham and Stawell areas, in regard, and it is spreading now to, the likes of Dimbour and further out, up at St Arnaud, places like that we don't, like, Gorham is Horsham based, so to have the likes of Stawell, St Arnaud, Dimmy, and even Japarret doing more of the work around Best Start and implementing change ideas, and then adopting them so that they're part of their normal daily process or program building. So it's, I guess it from where we started to where we are now, it's been a huge change. I mean, you just go into some of the buildings now, and it's not just the plaque on the wall that has the acknowledgement. You can actually see that some of the teachers are implementing Aboriginal culture as part of their program, and it's just become normal parts of it. Like, some of them now, they don't just have the plaque on the wall acknowledging culture, they do it, and the kids say the acknowledgement at the start of every session. There's a video from, I want to say Bluebird
Yeah, it's
or Meringue.
Community Kids,
Yeah.
Horsham, which is Bluebird.
Yeah, and they have a video of the kids doing a acknowledgement to country, and their version as well, which is amazing. Like, I go into Kalkee Road, and I still get stunned that there's that much stuff. And a lot of that was to do with one particular teacher, and I hope she's gone on to a different kinder, and I hope she's still doing the same things. So yeah, and
That isn't
You know,
that one particular teacher is an interesting point though, because I know when you first started this approach, all the Aboriginal families went to that one particular teacher, and I remember a really big success story of this at the start of this year was that she had no Aboriginal children this year, which does reflect exactly how broadly the services are now actually being welcoming of Aboriginal families.
yeah. And I thought a lot of people would follow her, just because her relationship with the Aboriginal community. I mean, some of the young kids that are going to this school, going to kinder with her, she was the teacher of their parents when they were at kinder.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how, how much trust they had in her, and for them to now be spread across, a bunch of different kinders, I think is a testament to the guys and the stuff that they're doing in the earlier space. So, and that includes the KPSAs and the KESOs and everyone else that's involved, helping, provide advice and guidance for us, and to pass on to the, to the service. It's, the services have been, at the start, they weren't as open. There was a lot of them that were too afraid to even try anything because they didn't want to do something wrong and, get chastised by the community. Until the KPSA at the time, Robin Lorachella, she said, don't be shame, be game. And, her and Alinta were really, were on board with the, telling kinders, just have a go. We'll help guide you and, provide you with feedback. And, if you've got Aboriginal parents within your kinder, ask them. And we've only talked about kinders, but, the MCHs, the stuff that they've done, which we'll go into a bit later, they've had some, particularly in Horsham, some massive gains. And again, it comes down to building relationships with the community and making it happen.
Yep.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you have. But I also wanted just to touch on the thing that is happening at the moment around Marung, and the changes in practice that are happening around that specifically, because one of our big things is at the moment we want to look at how we can use the Marung framework, because obviously it's a fantastic framework and it is a really well developed plan, but if we don't use it, I think you said yesterday that it's that's a piece of paper until we actually use it. So that's what we really want to do. So I just wanted to touch on the experience of the kindergarten teachers and how they're using Marung at the minute, using this approach.
So it also, I guess we'll go back a little bit, couple steps. We did a PD, I suppose, like a 2-hour PD a couple of years ago with Uniting, which, as you know, some people thought we couldn't do it as a PDSA.
You did it perfectly.
But we did. We did in the end. We did something. It ended up with another 13 PDSAs out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So just for background context, you were told by me in the department that you can only do PD if you have change ideas that come out of it. And interestingly, Delkaia was the only site that listened around that feedback. So other people did PD as well, but nobody else had that expectation of change ideas coming out of it. And the difference in what you guys could achieve on the back of that was amazing. So, so yes,
it was actually an interesting. It was actually an interesting, interesting concept. I didn't expect it to work as well as it did, and it grew a little bit of legs. But the one thing we asked, there was 40-something people that we did, and one of the things we asked was, do you know what Marung is? Because everyone knows what the Veldif is, and no one, like, some had heard of it, but none of them had picked it up and read it. So we, in our PowerPoint presentation, we highlighted some of the outcomes from the Marung, and a lot of it lines with the Veldif anyway. So, and then every time we went to a new kinder, another kinder, we'd keep raising it. Do you know what the Marung is? Do you know what the Marung is? Particularly Michelle, she spruiked it quite a lot, because I too like the document. I think it has some really good stuff in there, but I've said it before and 100 times, like you said, that if they're not using it, then it's just wasted. Anyway, 2020 comes along, and it turns out that there's 3 teachers at the moment, early years teachers, that are aligning their work to some of the outcomes of Maroon, which I was completely stunned, because I don't know what happened, but over the 2019, 2020 sort of holidays, they must have went Reddit and had to think about it. And then, all of a sudden we've got kindergartners sending us their programs and then showing how they're aligning to certain outcomes of the Maroon action plan. So whilst I think I've seen 2 plans from 2 different kinders, but there are others that are working on aligning their work with the Maroon action plan, and also doing Aboriginal content within their programming, which was one of the things we haven't talked about. So it was very interesting that there's been a massive change in the earlier space, particularly in our area, and people are starting to use the Maroon action plan to align with their work. And again, that's a testament to Michelle, and just raising it, and the guys within the early years services taking it on board and having a read of it.
The other thing I think is an important reflection too is around what families were saying previously compared with your survey outcomes for this year. Is that something we can touch on now? Oh no, this is for the next bit. Yep. So let's go to that bit around community engagement. And so I know that a lot of this work has come down to what the community's actually told you. And as you said before, you use community to inform what the logic model would look like, rather than it being, organisations coming up with what should happen. So what have you learnt, through that community engagement?
So one of the major things that we learned early this year was the last 2, so 17, 18 and 2019, the main theme was that parents wanted more on was making services culturally safe, the physical environment particularly. And then at the start of 2020, the cultural safety came down, and cultural content within the programming in the service went up. And obviously Gabby doesn't now have all the Aboriginal kids within her service, and they're spread across a lot more, particularly in Horsham. So cultural safety, I think, is probably at its highest point that's ever been for families attending early years services here. And this is, I'm not just talking about kinders either, I'm talking about MCH as well. So when we first started, one of the first things we did was ESK enrollments at Stall, and they had 150% increase in the first year, I suppose, that we started to do some work. And they did a lot of work around building relationships with families, which then Bluebird did as well, and they had a 500% increase in enrollments. And then you have the MCH stuff in Horsham. They went from 70%, CAS visits, I think back in 2018, 2017, I want to say somewhere around then. And, last year they had 96% CAS visits in Horsham. And all that is really attributed. The 3 things that those guys did was build relationships with community. So it shows that if you're willing to put in the work, make places safe for families to go to and build relationships with them, the stuff that they do has huge. It just had huge, increases in, even attendance. Like at Stall, I think it was at Moraine, the ESK enrollments increased, and their non-attendances decreased because of the relationship building that they had. So, client feedback, using it to build your planning, and it has to be their like if you don't take their feedback and do something with it, constructive and it makes them feel part of the journey. So it makes them feel, that you're listening and you care. So they're going to use your service. When you just do the old mission mentality and, you get their feedback, but you don't really use it and you just do what you want to do, then you're not listening and you're not hearing. So, with all the feedback, you have to do something with it. It's no good collecting it and then just sitting on it. We try to use all of our real-time feedback to take that back to services and then, do something with it meaningful. Our KPSAs do cultural audits with some of the services as well, just to give them an idea of what could be missing, what could be changed. We've got really young KPSA at the moment. She's learning a lot of that stuff, and while she's not at a stage where she's willing to say it directly to a kinder, we can get it out of her and then feed back to a kinder. And I also sometimes provide my own feedback because I'm a bit more experienced and I see things that they don't see. So yeah, like feedback, using it, making it real, building relationships has major impacts across the early years services. And I think the numbers speak for themselves when we, with the work that the early years service has done. We take a little bit of credit, but I give the majority of the credit to the guys on the, in the services. They're the ones being open to the feedback, whether it's good or bad, and actually making meaningful change, which has helped their service increase with numbers and participation.
Yeah, and it's one of those things because we know in other programs that attendance at kindergarten flows through into the school space. And so this is one of the things that we really know, that it's worth investing in that attendance in the early childhood space, because what we learn in this space is actually going to translate potentially into the school space as well. And so we know that from an evaluation of program perspective, etc. But it's really good to see that that's translating for you guys in terms of doing those simple things to improve relationships, just listening and taking on feedback and actively responding to it. It seems it's good to know that that is actually having an impact on the attendance. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, people have to remember too, in the best start approach, even though we get really good outcomes, there's probably 3 or 4 little things that have happened to make those outcomes, which is what the PDSAs and that are for. The whole idea of, I know what we're trying to do today is just to say how the Best Start program works. And I think if you can translate that into getting better attendance in primary or secondary by doing some of these small things and making small changes, you get the big change that you want at the end. And people have to really remember that.
Yeah, it is a good point, because we always tend to go to the bigger kind of system change approaches to anything that we want to change, instead of acknowledging that we can make those really small changes in practice. So, and it is good to know that those outcomes that you're talking about have come on the back of those really small changes in practice, rather than people trying to do multiple things at once, that it's just a really narrow focused approach.
I'll give you an example of a whole bunch of small things so people sort of get what we mean. So we'll take Delkaia Road Hub, for example. First thing they did was part of their design for the building. They put an Aboriginal fish trap design thing out the front that's interactive and kids can use, but it's also part of the aesthetic of the place. Then they decided, maybe we could put some Aboriginal artwork in the building, and I put up the idea of maybe do like we have at Gorham, we've got Aboriginal artwork in the floor. So they took footprints of animals, put them in. They've got the meeting place symbol in their front entrance. So we'll step it out. They've got the fish trap, up plaque acknowledgement country, the footprints, the meeting place in the tiles on the floor. They named the animals, the rooms after animals, which then they got the Wimmera language names. They then implemented some of this, they put in toys, Aboriginal toys and stuff within their service, whether it was in the actual kinder parts or within the MCH. They put up Aboriginal resources. One of them that was developed with us, with Horsham Rural City Council, around breastfeeding. They then, started to display the Aboriginal flags and the TI flag in kinders. Then they move on to explaining what each of the flags mean. Then they invite people in, yada, yada, yada. We've got, 7 or 8, 9, 10 different things that have led, you go into Delkaia Road and you can see how much Aboriginal content, like we even, Goulm even rents a space down there to do our play groups.
Yeah. Okay.
So, 9 or 10 things, small things done over a 2 or 3 year period, and you end up with, massive amounts of people using their service and stuff like that. So
yep,
it's just sort of highlights the implementing different things at different stages to get to a place where they've got some Aboriginal content in their programming, which is what we've started to do. Well, they've probably been doing it a bit over 12 months now anyway, but I hope people will sort of get the idea of what we're saying about small things lead to big changes, the big change that we want at the end.
Yep. Yeah, beautiful. How would you like to see this kind of improvement approach that you've used in the Best Start space to be implemented within the school system? So within schools, but also, I guess, from us as department reps, what can we do from your perspective that can, using this approach, how would you see it working for us?
One of the things that we've worked on probably the last 12 months is a transition project where teachers collect information about what the child coming from kinder sort of has been learning about themselves, about culture and stuff like that, putting that in a document, and then it goes to primary school. What the school does with it, I'm not 100% sure, and I don't think a lot of places are probably using that document for whatever reason. But I think that's one of the first things that should be taken note of, is what is coming out of their kinder stuff that they're transitioning with to primary school. I think meaningful feedback, at the start, whatever you collect is probably going to be a lot of criticism, but the schools have to be open to it, because if we don't figure out what's broken, we're never going to be able to fix it. So I think meaningful feedback around why attendance rates are so low is the first stepping point. And then once you've sort of got that feedback, I think then it's looking at, okay, what's a whole bunch, like we know what the big goal is of what they want to do is increase attendance, but what are the bunch of changes that they could make, either systems wise or people wise? When I say people, I mean like relationship wise, that they could change to help with attendance in increasing. So whether that's developing a logic model themselves and then looking at PDSAs around, I don't know if they want to go down that path, but I think DET should support, I don't know how they support them, but it can't be all reliant on the CESOs to fix a problem that's too big, say for the Wimmera, too big for 2 people. That's not going to have work. You need people on board, community on board with what you're trying to do. Maybe they have working groups within the schools with parents to get the feedback, but actively seek the feedback as well. You can't just look at tokenistic feedback. Try and get to the crux of what you're doing and how you want to do it. Be realistic with what you're what feedback you want. Because some of it is going to be bad. So you just have to accept that, I think. Does that make sense? I sort
Yeah,
of
it
rambled a little bit
does.
there. Then.
No, it completely makes sense because that's exactly, I mean, that's the reality. If we don't know what the challenges are, then how do you know how, like, where you can even start in addressing it? Because I think we make a lot of assumptions around things like attendance and why people aren't going. And I remember very early learning in the Best Start space, there was a child that wasn't attending kindergarten, and everyone assumed it was because there was a family violence issue, and it was actually because their washing machine was broken, and the mother didn't want to send the child with dirty clothes to kindergarten. And so once the washing machine got fixed, the child was back at kindergarten. And so there was a whole lot of assumptions going on, instead of just actually talking to the family and saying, hey, you know, how are you actually traveling, and getting that insight directly from the family. So I think we do make a
Yeah,
lot of assumptions, and all of those things that you were saying earlier around those, all of the stereotypes and that kind of stuff, people just bring their own bias to those assumptions. And if you actually ask community, it's amazing how different the response can be. And so, yeah, I think
yeah.
it's a really good starting point.
I'm probably going to say a swear word here, but um, you know, people who have been disenfranchised and trodden on for a long time are probably the best detectors of when people were telling them bullshit.
Yeah.
So don't bullshit someone that's, they're
Exactly.
already heightened, have their, they have their, their barriers up straight away. So, because if they sense it, then you're already, you've lost.
Yep.
So
But that,
when we, sorry.
no, I was just going to say that comes down to genuinely acting on feedback then. You know, like if
Yeah,
you're going to actually listen to people and then act on what they're saying, then surely that's going to help. It's going to go a long way to
yeah.
starting that relationship.
When you take feedback, you've got to do something in good faith to show that you're actually listening. And even to build relationships, it can't always be on the phone. Sometimes you got to do face to face, whether that's the teachers meeting them out when they're dropping their kids off and go home saying, oh, g'day Rachel, how you going today? Hope everything's going all right.
Yeah.
If you need anything, just give me a call.
Yeah.
Sort of things like that, and yeah, if the feedback has to be, like, you have to do something in good faith. Even if it's the smallest thing, they then think, oh, yeah, they might be looking to make some change. And if you do another small thing and then another small thing, all of a sudden people are starting to go, maybe they are trying. Maybe we
Yeah.
should try and put in a bit more to, make it look like that we're doing our part.
Have you found that people are more likely to provide more feedback once they see it happening? Like, because, I
Yep.
know that the Aboriginal community generally, are over surveyed and
So,
all of that kind of stuff, and so we don't want to add to that in any way. However, we need to get some feedback. But do you find that it does help?
well, this year was probably the most amount of parents we've had feedback from,
Yeah. Okay.
back in 2017, which was probably 3 or 4. And now we're getting up to 15 to 20,
Yeah.
people feedback from people that are using early year services. So I'm assuming that when they see, the services are doing something, that and it entices them to feedback more. Because
Yeah.
then like for me, if I was a parent and I was seeing change, I would be more open to feedback or providing feedback, so that if there's something that's been missed or something that hasn't been thought about, at least then I've got a forum to raise it. So yeah.
I was going to make some smart comment about the fact that you give me feedback constantly, but anyway, that's all
Yeah.
right. I take it
I
on.
should say, one of the things I wanted to say is that if we don't get the education part right, it leads to other problems. So for the Wimmera, for example, Aboriginal people in the Wimmera have the lowest rate of employment than the rest of Victoria. How do we change that?
Yeah.
We have to have kids educated. So the other thing is, which I'll get to in a minute. So if people don't get jobs, it's usually because they're not educated enough to do it. So that starts at primary school. If we've got to make a change there. And then it gets to secondary school. And I'm going to say something that a lot of people are not going to say, but Horsham College need to get rid of the Connect-Ed program, because unfortunately Aboriginal kids, there's two things. One, it's easy for them to get in there if they set their mind to it. And it's too easy for teachers to refer kids in there for non-attendance because they're falling behind or for whatever reason. It's a damning program that I do not like. And I said this 10 years ago when there was families in this program. So when I say families, I mean like 2 or 3 siblings from one family group within this program. And I know they've changed a lot of the program and what they've been doing, but if kids don't learn resilience by just attending school now, then they're not going to have any resilience when they get to be adults.
And that sits in very strongly in the Murrung framework as well, around resilience, and also, you know, the expectations around Aboriginal kids.
I know that's got nothing to do with Best Art, but I just don't like the Connect-Ed program. It is such a terrible program. Like, I don't know why. I don't know who come up with it, but there has to be something better than that. It probably is, but you know, it's just stupid. I don't see the point in it. Anyway, sorry. That's a rant again, off track.
Feedback. We're in the business of feedback. This is what we want.
If
you don't, yeah, I know. But if we don't act on that kind of feedback, then that's where, you know, sometimes
I can guarantee you, if you ask 10 Aboriginal people what they think of Connect-Ed, they're like parents, they're most likely going to say, I hate the program and I hope my child doesn't ever end up in there.
Yeah, right.
Because it's just stupid. I don't understand why they need a program, an alternate education program for any kid. You know, it's I think there's something broken in the school system if they can't, you know, deal with children.
The interesting thing you were saying before about that 2 to 3 children in one family kind of idea as well is, I think that's something that that I really like about the Best Start Improvement approach, because we can focus on that one family, for instance, and work out how to build better relationships with them and see if that can improve outcomes for that one family, because then that can have a flow-on effect more broadly. But it's about investing in those, like one family, one child can actually make a really big difference if you're able to invest and try and learn from building relationships and work out what works for those, you know, families, etc., rather than having to change the entire, you know, program, for instance. But working out, if you really invest in this family, does that change outcomes? And so I personally, that's what I really like about an improvement approach, because it doesn't have to be about every single child, but it can be about focusing on a couple of children or a family or whatever it might be.
And it all comes back to relationships with people. If you're not good at building relationships with people, as well as, you know, being an educator, it's easy to be an educator, but if you can't relate to people or build a relationship with them, then you're not going to get the outcomes that you want.
I think we've got that. That is absolutely embedded into Murrung. So aligns perfectly. All right, I'm going to stop recording now.